Funding for this program has been provided by PVC pipes for all of your disciplinary needs.
Mexico, a land of both beauty and conflict. The Mexican Revolution was a period of fighting and strife that lasted from 1910 to 1920. Various political leaders fought, hoping they could gain power in Mexico. Foreign countries such as the U.S. became involved in the conflict of power, despite the unnecessity of this.
Tonight, on 5 to 10 Minutes, several historians recount the actions of the U.S. during the Mexican Revolution and reenact the actions of important political leaders such as Henry Lane Wilson, Diaz, Madero, Taft, HOTA, Villa, Woodrow Wilson. We will return after a commercial break. My fellow Americans, this is President William Howard Taft discussing some urgent business with you. Well, just the other day, you're sitting in your bathtub and you realize I'm still wearing my clothes, but that's not the problem. You're stuck in your bathtub. Sometimes when I get stuck in my bathtub, I use my PVC pipe. Using a torque motion, start to twist until, oh my god, what is happening? I rise from the top of the bathtub and I am free. PVC pipes, not just a pipe. Bathroom use.
Now back to our actual project.
The United States' relationship with Mexico has also been bitter for both political and economic reasons. The United States almost always has supported those in power, whether in power legitimately or not.
In 1908, James Creelman interviewed Porfirio Diaz for a U.S. article. Diaz promoted Mexican stability and stated that he would continue investing in the U.S., as well as that he would not run for re-election. However, he was lying.
I'm James Creelman. I have Porfirio Diaz here. So, Mr. Diaz, what are your plans for Mexico's future?
Well, we're going to preserve Mexico's stability. And then, now that the Mexicans can run themselves now, I will not be running for re-election.
In 1910, Francisco Madero begins campaigning for president. Supporters of Madero include landless peasants, women, Native Americans, workers, and students. As election day approaches, Francisco Madero is jailed, and Diaz goes back on his promise and runs for and wins re-election. Francisco Madero publishes the Plan de San Luis Potosi and returns to Mexico. In March 1911, an urban revolt is led by the Maderistas, and Diaz leaves for Europe in May of 1911. In November of 1911, Francisco Madero takes office as much to the dismay of the U.S. ambassador, Henry Lane Wilson. Madero favored foreign investment, but would not show special favoritism towards the U.S.
To tell the story of Henry Lane Wilson's involvement with the U.S., we've put together this corrido, rapped by me and featuring Grammy Award-winning songbird Sean Tu. 1910 revolution in the air. Taft sends Henry Lane Wilson to Mexico to protect U.S. economic interests there. Oil, mining, railroads, and so. Only wanted money. Taft didn't care about Mexican citizens or the way that things would go. Peasants were sick of Diaz's autocracy, sick of being treated like trash. Madero wants democracy, create forces and start a clash. Overthrew the Porfiriato and Diaz flees. Madero becomes president and he's a big smash. Madero no threat to U.S., but Wilson didn't like him. 1913 is the start of a mess. He sends messages to Washington, claiming country was in chaos. American citizens were in a dangerous situation.
Taft had no idea what was going on. Wilson organizes a coup against the Mexican president. The plans were on. Wilson helps Huerta, not knowing how things would go. Begins the 10 tragic day until they're gone. Huerta terrorizes Mexico City.
Madero was targeted. His wife begs Wilson to let him live, but in the end he was found dead. The Mexican people were outraged. They would never forgive. Huerta took power, or so he said. The Mexican people knew loyalty. They wouldn't forgive.
1913, Woodrow Wilson becomes prez. This represents a change in political landscape, and now Henry Lane Wilson has to do what he says. He is called to Washington, so changes says. Henry Lane Wilson was fired by orders of the prez. He went home and ate a crepe.
Huerta rises to power in 1913. In the midst of the revolution, he struggles to hold it. In 1914, 7 U.S. sailors were arrested for straying into an off-limits area and were paraded through crowds in a town of Mexico. The sailors were quickly released, but commander of the U.S. Atlantic Fleet, Admiral Henry T. Mayo, demanded a formal apology, a 21-gun salute, and that Mexico raise the American flag on her soil. This would then lead to the U.S. bombardment of Veracruz.
Wilson had received word that a German ship was approaching Veracruz. The president ordered the immediate occupation of Veracruz. Fighting was fierce. More than 300 Mexicans and about 90 Americans were killed. This act unified the previously divided Mexicans.
In 1913, Venustiano Carranza forms a constitutional army to overthrow Huerta and establish his constitutional democracy in Mexico. In mid-1914, he defeats Huerta with the help of Alvaro Obregón. Carranza pushes Villa out of any position of power he could have had. After the Aguas Calientes meeting, Carranza becomes the leader and meets opposition by both Villa and Emiliano Zapata. In 1916, Pancho Villa invades Columbus, New Mexico in hopes of scavenging military supplies for his fight against Carranza. Despite this surprise attack by Villa, Americans quickly recover and defend themselves. 18 Americans are killed and 80 Mexicans are killed in the conflict. Villa retreats to Mexico, and Americans send forces to pursue him, but are not able to capture him. American casualties throughout the conflict were much smaller than Mexicans.
Next week on 5 to 10 Minutes, we'll discuss the rise and fall of Zayn Malik, what happened, and what isn't he telling us.
10 minutes. Several historians.
Tonight on 5 to 10 Minutes. Sarah, I can't.
Oh God.
And just the other day, I was sitting in my bathtub, and I realized that I had all my clothes on, but that was...
In 1913, Carranza forms a constitutional army to... Wait, what's Carranza's first name?
I'm James Creelman. I have Porfirio Diaz here. So, Mr. Diaz, what are your plans for Mexico's future?
Well, we're gonna preserve Mexico's stability, and then we're gonna...